Shadows of the Past. Captain Lena Ryder stood on the bridge of the ECS Valiant, her eyes fixed on the holographic display before her. The sleek, angular lines of the Earth Coalition starship cut through the void of space like a knife, its powerful engines propelling it toward the distant planet Zephyr. Lena's second-in-command, Commander Ethan Reeves, approached her with a data pad in hand. "Captain, we're picking up the distress signal from the mining colony. It's weak, but still broadcasting." Lena nodded, her brow furrowed in concern. "Any more details on what's happening down there?" "Negative, Captain. The signal is heavily degraded. We'll know more once we're in orbit." The Valiant had been dispatched to investigate the distress call from the remote mining colony on Zephyr, a small planet on the fringes of Earth Coalition space. The colony was responsible for extracting valuable minerals essential for the Coalition's advanced technologies, but had suddenly gone silent a few days ago. As the ship approached Zephyr, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The colony was well defended and had strict communication protocols in place. For them to send a distress signal and then go dark was highly unusual. "Lieutenant Chen, what's our ETA to Zephyr?" Lena asked the ship's navigator. "We'll be entering orbit in approximately 30 minutes, Captain," Chen replied, her fingers dancing across the navigation console. Lena turned to her communications officer, Ensign Liu. "Keep trying to establish contact with the colony. I want to know what we're walking into." Liu nodded, his face illuminated by the glow of his console. "Aye, Captain." As the Valiant drew closer to Zephyr, Lena's unease grew. She had a wealth of experience dealing with pirate raids, equipment malfunctions, and even the occasional natural disaster, but something about this situation felt different. Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the bridge. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple unidentified ships in orbit around Zephyr." Ensign Sorensen, the tactical officer, reported urgently. Lena's eyes widened as she saw the ships on the holographic display. They were unlike anything she had ever seen before, sleek, angular, and bristling with advanced weaponry. "Red alert. All hands to battle stations," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. The Valiant's crew sprang into action, their training and discipline taking over. Lena watched as the unknown ships began to move, their formations shifting into an aggressive posture. "Captain, we're being targeted," Sorensen shouted, his fingers flying across his console. "Evasive maneuvers. Get our shields up and ready weapons," Lena commanded, gripping the arms of her chair tightly. The Valiant banked hard to starboard, narrowly avoiding a barrage of energy weapons from the alien ships. The bridge shuddered as the shields absorbed the impact of the few shots that managed to connect. Lena's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the situation. Who were these attackers, and what did they want with the mining colony? As the Valiant returned fire, its own weapons slicing through the void towards the enemy ships, Lena knew that the answers to those questions might very well determine the fate of her ship and crew. The battle raged on, the Valiant weaving through the enemy formation, its shields straining under the onslaught. Lena's crew worked with precision and skill, but the alien ships seemed to anticipate their every move. Just as the situation seemed dire, a blinding flash of light erupted from the surface of Zephyr. The alien ships suddenly broke off their attack, turning their attention to the planet below. "Captain, I'm picking up a massive energy signature from the colony," Sorensen reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. Lena stared at the holographic display, her eyes widening as she saw the readings. Whatever had just happened on the surface of Zephyr, it had been powerful enough to draw the attention of their mysterious attackers. As the alien ships descended towards the planet, Lena knew that the Valiant's mission had just become far more complicated than a simple rescue operation. The secrets of Zephyr, and the identity of their new enemy, would have to be uncovered if they hoped to survive. With grim determination, Lena ordered the Valiant to follow the alien ships, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The shadows of the past had risen to threaten the present, and it would fall to Lena and her crew to unravel the mystery before it consumed them all. Echoes of war. As the ECS Valiant descended through the atmosphere of Zephyr, Captain Lena Ryder couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of her stomach. The alien ships that had attacked them in orbit were now nowhere to be seen, but their presence hung over the planet like a dark cloud. "Status report," Lena demanded, her eyes fixed on the view screen. "We're approaching the coordinates of the mining colony now, Captain," Lieutenant Chen responded, her fingers dancing across the navigation console. Still no response to our hails. Lena frowned, her mind racing with possibilities. The colony had gone silent before, but never like this. Something was very wrong. As the Valiant broke through the clouds, the scope of the devastation below became clear. The once thriving mining colony was now a smoldering ruin, its buildings shattered and its defenses in ruins. Plumes of smoke rose from the wreckage, casting an eerie pall over the landscape. "My God," Commander Reeves breathed, his eyes wide with horror. "What happened here?" Lena shook her head, her jaw clenched tight. "That's what we're here to find out. Sorensen, scan for survivors. Chen, find us a place to set down. We need to get boots on the ground." The crew sprang into action, their training and discipline taking over. Within moments, the Valiant had touched down on a rocky outcropping near the edge of the colony, its landing gear sinking into the loose soil. Lena stood, her hand resting on the butt of her sidearm. "Reeves, you're with me. We'll take a security team and search for survivors. The rest of you, stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with here." As the landing ramp lowered, Lena and her team stepped out onto the surface of Zephyr. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and burning metal, and the ground was littered with debris from the shattered buildings. They moved cautiously through the ruins, their weapons at the ready. The silence was eerie, broken only by the crunch of their boots on the rubble and the occasional crackle of flames. Suddenly, a movement caught Lena's eye. She whirled, her weapon trained on the source. "Come out with your hands up," she ordered, her voice ringing through the stillness. Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, his clothes torn and his face streaked with soot. He raised his hands above his head, his eyes wide with fear. "Don't shoot," he pleaded, his voice hoarse. "I'm unarmed." Lena lowered her weapon slightly, but kept it trained on the man. "Identify yourself," she demanded. "My name is Dr. Elias Novak," the man replied, his voice shaking. "I'm the lead researcher at the colony. Please, you have to help us. They came out of nowhere. And they—" He trailed off, his eyes haunted. Lena stepped forward, her expression softening slightly. "Who attacked you, Dr. Novak?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. Novak shook his head, his eyes distant. "We don't know," he whispered. "They were unlike anything we've ever seen before. Advanced technology, weapons that cut through our defenses like they were nothing. We tried to fight back, but—" He choked back a sob, his shoulders shaking. Lena reached out and placed a hand on his arm, trying to offer some small measure of comfort. "We'll do everything we can to help," she promised. "But we need to know more. What were they after? Why attack the colony?" Novak's eyes snapped back into focus, and he met Lena's gaze with a look of grim determination. "They were searching for something," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Something we discovered in the mines, something ancient and powerful. We tried to keep it hidden, but they found out somehow. That's why they attacked." Lena's mind raced, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The alien ships, the devastating attack, the secrets hidden beneath the surface of Zephyr. It all pointed to something far larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. "Show me," she said, her voice brooking no argument. "Take me to this thing they were after." Novak hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me," he said, turning and leading them deeper into the ruins of the colony. As they walked, Lena's mind churned with questions and possibilities. Who were these aliens, and what did they want with the artifact hidden on Zephyr? More importantly, how had they known about it in the first place? She had a feeling that the answers to those questions would be the key to unraveling the mystery of the attack and to preventing an even greater catastrophe from unfolding. But as they descended into the depths of the mines, following Novik's lead, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The echoes of war had led them to this moment, but what lay ahead was anyone's guess. All Lena knew was that she would do whatever it took to protect her crew, the colony, and the secrets that lay buried beneath the surface of Zephyr, no matter the cost. Revelations. The depths of the mines were dark and oppressive, the air thick with the scent of dust and stale sweat. Captain Lena Ryder and her team followed Dr. Elias Novak deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Lena couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her like a shroud. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to retreat to the safety of the Valiant, and leave this cursed place behind. But she knew that wasn't an option. Not with so much at stake. How much further? She asked, her voice echoing in the confined space. Novak glanced back over his shoulder, his face gaunt and haunted in the harsh light of the flashlights. Not far now, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Just a little deeper. Lena nodded, her hand tightening on the grip of her sidearm. She could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something was waiting for them in the darkness ahead. Suddenly, Novak came to a halt, his flashlight beam settling on a small, nondescript door set into the wall of the tunnel. "We're here," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Lena stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the door. It was plain and unassuming, with no markings or signs to indicate what lay beyond. But as she reached out to touch it, she felt a strange tingling sensation in her fingertips, like a low-level electrical current. "Stand back," she ordered, drawing her weapon. "Reeves, cover me." Her second-in-command nodded, his own weapon at the ready. Lena took a deep breath, then pushed the door open with a firm shove. What lay beyond took her breath away. The room was vast, easily the size of a football field, with walls that curved up to a distant ceiling. And in the center of it all, suspended in a shimmering force field, was an object unlike anything Lena had ever seen. It was a perfect sphere, roughly the size of a small car, its surface a swirling mass of colors and shapes that seemed to shift and change before her eyes. It pulsed with an inner light, casting an eerie glow over the entire room. "What is that thing?" Reeves breathed, his eyes wide with wonder and fear. Novak stepped forward, his face a mix of awe and trepidation. "We call it the Nexus," he said, his voice hushed. "We discovered it buried deep in the mines, in a chamber that predates any known civilization. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before." Lena stared at the Nexus, her mind racing with possibilities. "What does it do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Novak shook his head. "We're not entirely sure," he admitted, "but from what we've been able to gather, it's some kind of power source, a battery for lack of a better term. But the energy it contains, it's beyond anything we've ever seen before. It could power entire cities, entire worlds, for centuries." Lena's eyes widened as the implications sank in. And the aliens who attacked the colony, they were after this. Novak nodded grimly. "We believe so. We've been studying the Nexus for months, trying to unlock its secrets. But when the aliens arrived, they seemed to know exactly what they were looking for. They tore through our defenses like they were nothing, all in pursuit of this." Lena's mind raced, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The devastating attack on the colony, the single-minded determination of the alien forces. It all made sense now. The Nexus was the key to everything. But even as understanding dawned, a new realization sent a chill down her spine. If the aliens were willing to go to such lengths to obtain the Nexus, then they wouldn't stop until they had it in their possession. and if they succeeded, the consequences could be catastrophic. Lena turned to Novak, her expression grim. "We need to get this thing out of here," she said, her voice brooking no argument. "If the aliens find it, there's no telling what they'll do with it. We have to keep it out of their hands, no matter the cost." Novak hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I agree," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. "But moving it won't be easy. The force field is the only thing keeping it stable. If we disrupt that—" Lena held up a hand, cutting him off. "We'll find a way," she said, her voice firm. "We have to. The fate of the colony, maybe even the fate of the entire galaxy, depends on it." As she spoke, a deep rumble shook the chamber, sending dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. Lena's head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. "They're here," Reeves said, his voice tight with fear. "The aliens. They found us." Lena's jaw clenched, her grip tightening on her weapon. "Then we make our stand here," she said, her voice ringing with determination. "We hold them off long enough to get the Nexus out, no matter what it takes." As the rumble grew louder, the sound of alien weapons echoing through the tunnels, Lena knew that the battle for the Nexus had begun. The secrets of Zephyr had been revealed, but the fight to keep them out of enemy hands was just beginning. And she would be damned if she let them fall. The battle for Zephyr. The sound of alien weapons fire echoed through the tunnels, drawing ever closer to the chamber where Captain Lena Ryder and her team stood their ground. The air was thick with tension and the acrid scent of smoke, and the walls shook with the force of the approaching onslaught. Lena's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out of the impossible situation they found themselves in. The Nexus, the ancient and powerful artifact they had discovered, was the key to everything. If the aliens got their hands on it, the consequences would be unimaginable. But protecting the Nexus meant facing down a force that had already proven itself to be far superior in both technology and numbers. It was a suicide mission, and Lena knew it. Still, she refused to back down. She had sworn an oath to protect the people of the Earth Coalition, and that included the brave men and women of the mining colony on Zephyr. She would not abandon them to the mercy of these alien invaders. "We need to buy ourselves some time," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Novak, is there any way to reinforce that force field around the Nexus?" The scientist hesitated, his face etched with fear and uncertainty. I don't know," he stammered. "We never anticipated anything like this. The field was designed to contain the Nexus, not protect it from attack." Lena's jaw clenched, her mind racing. "We have to try," she said, her voice brooking no argument. "Reeves, take your squad and set up a perimeter. Buy us as much time as you can." Her second-in-command nodded grimly, his face set with determination. "Aye, Captain," he said, before turning to his men. "You heard the captain. Let's move." As Reeves and his squad took up defensive positions around the chamber, Lena turned back to Novak. "I need you to do whatever you can to strengthen that force field," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We can't let the aliens get their hands on the Nexus." Novak swallowed hard, then nodded. "I'll do my best," he promised, before turning to the control panel and beginning to work. Lena watched him for a moment, then turned to face the entrance to the chamber. She could hear the sound of fighting now, the sharp crack of coalition weapons answered by the sizzling hiss of alien energy beams. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her hand was steady on the grip of her sidearm. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the chamber, sending debris flying in all directions. Lena threw herself to the ground, covering her head with her arms as chunks of rock and metal rained down around her. When the dust cleared, she looked up to see a gaping hole in the wall of the chamber. And through that hole, she could see the alien forces pouring in, their weapons blazing with deadly energy. Lena scrambled to her feet, her weapon at the ready. "Reeves," she shouted, her voice hoarse with dust and fear. "Fall back to the Nexus. We have to hold them off." But even as she spoke, she knew it was hopeless. The aliens were too many, too strong. They surged forward like a tidal wave, their weapons cutting through the coalition defenses like a hot knife through butter. Lena stood her ground, firing her weapon with grim determination. Beside her, Reeves and his men fought with equal ferocity, their faces etched with the knowledge that they were fighting a losing battle. And then, just when all seemed lost, a blinding flash of light erupted from the center of the chamber. Lena threw up a hand to shield her eyes, squinting against the glare. When her vision cleared, she saw the Nexus, glowing with an inner light that was almost too bright to look at. And around it, the force field shimmered and pulsed, growing stronger and more resilient with each passing second. "What's happening?" Lena demanded, her voice barely audible over the roar of the battle. Novak looked up from the control panel, his face a mask of awe and disbelief. "I don't know," he whispered. "But the force field, it's drawing power from the Nexus itself. It's becoming self-sustaining." Lena's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope sparking in her chest. "Can we use that?" she asked, her mind racing with possibilities. "Can we turn the Nexus into a weapon, use it against the aliens?" Novak hesitated, his face conflicted. I don't know," he admitted. "The power contained within the Nexus is beyond anything we've ever seen before. To try to harness it, to weaponize it, the risks would be enormous." Lena's jaw clenched, her eyes hard with determination. "We don't have a choice," she said, her voice raw with emotion. "If we don't do something, the aliens will take the Nexus and use it against us. We have to strike first." Novak held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "I'll do what I can." As Novak turned back to the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys, Lena turned to face the battle once more. The aliens were closing in, their weapons blazing with deadly energy. But now she had a plan. A desperate, reckless plan, but a plan nonetheless. She only hoped it would be enough. Legacy. The chamber shook with the force of the alien onslaught, the walls cracking and buckling under the relentless barrage of energy weapons. Captain Lena Ryder stood at the center of the maelstrom, her face set with grim determination as she watched Dr. Elias Novak work frantically at the control panel. "How much longer?" she shouted over the roar of the battle, her voice hoarse with dust and exhaustion. Novak shook his head, his fingers flying over the keys. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice strained with tension. "This technology is beyond anything I've ever seen before. I'm doing my best, but—" He trailed off, his words lost in another earth-shattering explosion. Lena gritted her teeth, her grip tightening on her weapon. They were running out of time. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the center of the chamber, bathing everything in an eerie, pulsing glow. Lena threw up a hand to shield her eyes, squinting against the glare. When her vision cleared, she saw the Nexus, hovering in the air above the control panel. It was pulsing with energy, its surface shimmering and shifting like a kaleidoscope of colors. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice barely audible over the roar of the battle. Novak looked up at her, his face a mask of awe and terror. "I've tapped into the Nexus's power source," he said, his voice trembling. "I've redirected its energy, turned it into a weapon. But the strain on the containment field, I don't know how long it will hold." Lena's eyes widened, a cold knot of fear settling in the pit of her stomach. "We have to use it now," she said, her voice brooking no argument. "We may not get another chance." Novak hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You're right," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "But the risks. We don't have a choice." Lena cut him off, her eyes hard with determination. "It's now or never." She turned to face the entrance to the chamber, where the alien forces were massing for another assault. She could see them through the haze of smoke and debris, their armor glinting in the pulsing light of the Nexus. "Reeves," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Fall back to the Nexus. We're going to give these bastards a taste of their own medicine." Her second-in-command nodded grimly, signaling to his men to take up defensive positions around the artifact. Lena turned back to Novak, her expression fierce. "Do it," she ordered, her voice cold as steel. Novak took a deep breath, then entered a final command into the control panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a roar that shook the very foundations of the chamber, the Nexus unleashed its power. A wave of energy erupted from the artifact, a blinding pulse of light and heat that swept outward in all directions. It passed through the Coalition soldiers like a warm breeze, leaving them unharmed. But the alien forces were not so lucky. The energy wave slammed into them like a physical force, hurling them backwards and shattering their armor like glass. They screamed in agony as the Nexus power tore through them, reducing them to ash and dust in the blink of an eye. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The chamber fell silent, the only sound the hiss of settling debris and the ragged breathing of the survivors. Lena lowered her weapon, her heart hammering in her chest. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Novak nodded slowly, his face etched with exhaustion and relief. "It's over," he confirmed, his voice trembling. "The Nexus, it's depleted. The energy it contained, the power it held, it's gone. Forever." Lena closed her eyes, a wave of emotion washing over her. Relief, triumph, and a deep aching sense of loss. The Nexus had been their salvation, but it had also been a curse, a power too great for any one species to wield. In the end, they had won the battle. But at what cost? As she looked around the ruined chamber, at the faces of her battered and weary crew, Lena knew that the legacy of Zephyr would stay with them forever. They had faced the unknown, stood against impossible odds, and emerged victorious. But the scars they bore, both physical and mental, would never truly heal. They had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. And in that moment, Lena knew that nothing would ever be the same again.